Arlis K. Perry, a 19-year-old newlywed, ventured into the Stanford Memorial Church on the grounds of Stanford University during the late hours of October 12, 1974. Tragically, she was discovered the following morning, brutally murdered in what appeared to be a ritualistic fashion. Numerous rumors and theories began circulating regarding the identity of her killer. The speculation included connections to infamous individuals such as the Son of Sam, the Zodiac Killer, the Death Angels, and the Process Church. Despite extensive efforts by the police, no substantial leads were obtained in the investigation, and the question lingered for decades. Arlis Perry was born on February 22, 1955, in Linton, North Dakota, to Marvin Dykema and Jean Van Beek. Marvin served in World War II before returning home and working at Chase Chevrolet for over 20 years. Her parents planned and started the Bismarck Reformed Church, now known as the Bismarck Community Church. In 1973, Arlis graduated from Bismarck High School, where she actively participated as a cheerleader and was a member of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. She was always smiling, Sue DeCock said, always happy, a bubbling personality. During her time there, she developed a close relationship with her high school sweetheart, Bruce Perry. Bruce was a track star who held the all-time state record for the quarter-mile run and tied the state meet record. His family had been a prominent one in Bismarck. His father was a dentist, while his maternal grandfather was a Democrat politician. Upon graduation, Bruce gained admission to Stanford University, while Arlis remained in Bismarck. She attended junior college while also serving as a Sunday school teacher in her parents' church. They shared this deep belief in God, Rudy Steidel said. They had more communication and approached their problems more maturely than some of the older couples I've seen. They were a very special young couple. It was during this period after high school graduation that Arlis encountered members of the Process Church. Living across the street from her grandmother's house, 6 young men resided together: Father Christian, Brother Thomas, Brother Joseph, and 3 other individuals referred to as initiates. These men attempted to indoctrinate Arlis into their religious beliefs, but she quickly grew disillusioned with their system of faith. Recognizing their affiliation with devil worship, she dedicated herself to proselytizing anyone involved with the Process Church, aiming to guide them from Satanism to Christianity. Brad King, a former classmate of Arlis, said, quote, "I remember seeing people dressed in priest outfits, but instead of white collars, they wore red collars and sported upside-down crosses draped around their necks. I think they were called the Holy Order of Mans." During the early 1970s, the Process Church gained notoriety due to its close association with the Manson family. This controversial cult embraced a belief system that allowed simultaneous worship of both Christ and Satan. Initially established in Los Angeles and New York, the church expanded its reach to North Dakota, drawn to the seclusion provided by the hills and forests. They held gatherings at Bismarck's Hillside Cemetery and a wooded area behind Mary College. It was in these locations that disturbing reports emerged, detailing the church's involvement in stealing dogs from nearby trailer park residents and sacrificing them in satanic rituals. Some residents later discovered their mutilated dogs lying lifeless within pentagrams drawn into the dirt. Meanwhile, Arlis continued a long-distance romance with Bruce Perry, who had began his studies at Stanford. Eventually, Bruce returned home and asked for Arlis's hand in marriage. Arlis's parents initially disapproved of their decision to marry, but later supported the union. Now married, Arlis then joined Bruce in the Bay Area as he began his second year in Stanford's pre-med program. The couple lived at the Quillen House, a residential unit specifically designed for married students on campus. With Bruce's demanding academic schedule, Arlis found herself with ample free time and a growing restlessness. To occupy herself during the day when Bruce was away, she took a receptionist position at a local law firm. One of the attorneys later told investigators that he had seen Arlis in an intense conversation with a man the day before her murder. The attorney thought mistakenly that the man was Arlis's husband. He was described as having a medium build, about 5'10", with sandy blonde, curly hair. Arlis didn't reveal the man's identity to her coworkers and also didn't tell her husband about him. Arlis had developed a routine of taking nightly walks around the campus, prompting concerns from Bruce about her safety. Arlis complied with his request, not going out after dark unless they were together. On October 12, 1974, at around 11:30 p.m., Bruce and Arlis were walking across the Stanford campus when they discovered a flat tire on Arlis's car. A minor argument ensued as Bruce complained that Arlis needed to check the air pressure on the wheels. This angered Arlis, who had been feeling lonely in the 6 weeks since they moved on campus. Bruce decided to return to the dormitory, while Arlis wanted to go to the memorial church where she could pray alone. Not an unusual thing for her to do. Several individuals were called seeing Arlis enter the church. Security guard James Crawford told the people in attendance that the church would be closing in 15 minutes. Witnesses also recalled seeing a sandy-haired man enter the church as well. His description, police say, closely resembled the man who visited Arlis's office the day before. Neither the man at the church nor the visitor has ever been identified. Security guard Crawford stated that he locked the church at 11:45 p.m., did a security pass at 2 a.m., and did not see anyone around. Hours passed without Arlis returning home, and a concerned Bruce went looking for her. He called the police at 3 a.m., stating that his wife was missing after she failed to return home. Police went to the church and found all of the outer doors locked. But the following morning, at approximately 5:40 a.m., security guard Steve Crawford notified police that he found Arlis's body dead inside the church. Crawford's call to the police was odd, as he said, quote, "Hey, we've got a stiff here." Arlis was found spread-eagled on her back, her head lolled to the left. Her right arm, palm down, was under her waist. Deep purple bruises on her neck matched the pattern of her beaded necklace. Her double-breasted coat was open, and her sweater was pushed several inches above her waist. A 2-foot altar candle had been shoved between her breasts, breaking both bra straps. Another altar candle, snapped in two by the force, was rammed into her vagina. Her blue jeans were draped over her body, with the legs toward her head. Near her legs were her sandals and panties. Embedded deep within her head, so deep it wasn't discovered until the autopsy, was a 5.5-inch ice pick. It was jammed into the base of her skull from the left. The killer either broke off or removed the handle. Arlis had not been raped, but the kneeling cushion beside her bore stains of semen by a man who could have type O blood. A partial bloodied handprint was lifted from one of the candles. Arlis's eyeglasses were missing, and FBI profilers later believed that her killer took them as a trophy. Security guard Crawford stated that he had locked up the church shortly after midnight and made sure that the doors were secure. He verified this again around 2 a.m. At 3 a.m., Bruce Perry contacted the police to report his wife's disappearance. When the Santa Clara County Sheriff's officers arrived at the church, they found all the doors locked. Crawford returned at 5:45 a.m. to unlock the doors and noticed that the west side door was open. Bruce Perry was initially the prime suspect. The police subjected him to intense interrogation, accusing him of killing his wife because of an alleged affair. Perry denied these allegations and took a polygraph test, which he passed. Santa Clara County Sheriff Tom Rosa described the slaying as, quote, "a typical, if there is such a thing, sexual psychopathic killing." However, rumors began circulating on campus, suggesting that Arlis fell victim to a satanic torture rite known as the Black Mass. Rosa refuted these claims, stating that the incident lacked any cult-like undertones and had merely occurred within a church setting. No signs of a struggle were evident, leading detectives to believe that Arlis had fallen victim to a swift and sudden attack as she entered the church around midnight. Bruce informed authorities that Arlis often sought solace in the church when faced with difficulties in her life. The unsolved murder of Arlis Perry gave rise to various conspiracy theories, suggesting that her death was not the work of a lone psychopath, but rather the result of a satanic cult that had been stalking her from Bismarck, North Dakota. The positioning of Arlis's body, with her legs spread and candles inserted into her breasts and vagina, led those familiar with occult practices to speculate that this was a ritualistic killing. Adding fuel to the speculation were cryptic messages from David Berkowitz, known as the Son of Sam Killer in New York City. In his correspondence with authorities in North Dakota, Berkowitz mentioned the Perry murder, claiming to have information about the killer, whom he referred to as Manson No. 2. In 1979, 5 years after the murder, Berkowitz sent a book to North Dakota police with a margin note stating, quote, "Arlis Perry, hunted, stalked, and slain, followed to California, Stanford University." Berkowitz insinuated that he was not the sole perpetrator of the New York murders and hinted at his involvement in a larger satanic cult. Detectives later interviewed Berkowitz regarding Perry's murder, but concluded that he had no valuable information to offer. However, some followers of the case believe that Berkowitz should have been subjected to a more rigorous interrogation. The Manson number 2 referenced by Berkowitz was William Menser, a suspected figure in the Son of Sam cult who had connections to the Manson family and was also a suspected Zodiac killer. Menser's potential involvement in Arlis Perry's murder may be tied to his alleged participation in a hit squad associated with the Process Church. It is believed that he carried out assassination assignments for higher-ranking members who needed someone eliminated. Interestingly, the Zodiac Killer's series of murders ceased after Menser's imprisonment. Detectives noted striking parallels between Zodiac's crimes and Menser's background. The Zodiac Killer displayed signs of military training, and Menser had served in the Marines during the Vietnam War, having killed 10 people upon his return in 1968. The Zodiac stabbed 2 victims with a bayonet-style knife featuring rivets, while Menser worked at an aerospace company that manufactured rivets. The Zodiac also sent a diagram of a bomb to newspapers, threatening to blow up a school bus, and Menser had a job as a bus driver. Additionally, Menser possessed military training in demolitions and plastic explosives. Survivors of the Zodiac's attacks described the killer's speech as slow and monotone, matching Menser's manner of speaking. After a final letter to the press, the Zodiac Killer mysteriously vanished in 1974. Menser, on the other hand, was later arrested for his involvement in the brutal murders of Roy Radin in 1983 and June Mincher, a prostitute and madam, in 1984. Radin was shot more than 20 times in the head, and Menser placed a stick of dynamite in his mouth, which blew off his face.
Homicide detectives say Roy Radin was marched up this hill and then executed in such a brutal way that the body, when found, bore little resemblance to a human being. Homicide detective Carlos Avila.
It was very severe. You take account that the man's been shot in the back of the head 8 to 10 times, and then you see how the face has been distorted with a quarter, what amounted to a quarter stick of dynamite.
Blown up in his mouth?
Yeah, in his mouth. Just placed it right in his mouth and lit it and blew it up. And
despite these connections, law enforcement did not find sufficient evidence to directly link Menser to being the Zodiac Killer, and he was never questioned about Arlis Perry's murder, despite circulating rumors. Crime writer Maury Terry took it upon himself to investigate Arlis Perry's murder and retrace her steps. Through his research, he developed a theory that suggested up to 4 individuals were involved in her death. According to Terry, the sandy-haired man who visited Perry at the law firm was a cult member from Bismarck, possibly someone she knew from the Process Church. Terry speculated that Arlis may have stumbled upon information or witnessed something that she shouldn't have, which could have posed a threat to the cult. He believed that someone in Bismarck approved her murder, and they had connections to seek assistance on the West Coast, indicating a level of sophistication in their operation. As for Bruce Perry, he went on to establish a successful career as a researcher in children's mental health and the neurosciences, gaining international recognition in his field. During Arlis's funeral, a coworker from the law firm was confused when he saw Bruce because he had encountered a different man earlier, whom he assumed was Arlis's husband. This man matched the description of the sandy-haired individual seen following Arlis into the church on the night of her murder. Curiously, Perry's murder was not an isolated incident. It was part of a series of unsolved murders that occurred in and around the Stanford campus during the early 1970s, adding to the perplexing nature of the case. These homicides raised concerns about a possible serial killer at work. Arlis Perry's murder marked the 4th such incident in less than 2 years, with 3 of the victims being young women who were alone at the time of the attacks. This series of killings began with Leslie Marie Perloff, a 21-year-old Stanford history graduate and Palo Alto law librarian. She went missing on February 13, 1973, after leaving her workplace. 3 days later, her dead body was discovered in the foothills behind the campus. Perloff had been strangled, and a scarf was tightly wrapped around her throat. There were no signs of a struggle near her body, suggesting that she had walked to that location voluntarily. Although her skirt was pulled up and her pantyhose stuffed into her mouth, there was no evidence of a sexual assault. During the search for Perloff, the body of Mark Rosvold, a 25-year-old man from Palo Alto, was also found. Roswald's death was initially believed to be a suicide and was not directly linked to Perloff's murder. Perloff was last seen at the Stanford campus quarry gate, engaging in a conversation with a man who had long blonde hair. 7 months after Perloff's murder, another tragic incident occurred. David S. Levine, a physics student, was found stabbed to death on a walkway east of the Meyer Undergraduate Library. The attack was estimated to have taken place between 1 and 3 a.m. Levine's body, discovered by an early morning jogger, showed 15 stab wounds to the back and side. Similar to the previous cases, there were no signs of a struggle, indicating that the victim had been caught off guard. Robbery was ruled out as a motive since Levine's wallet remained in his pants pocket. Levine was described as a brilliant student with straight A grades. San Francisco Mayor Joseph Alioto expressed his belief that the murders could be connected to a cult known as the Death Angels. This cult was suspected in the infamous zebra killings in San Francisco. 3 months after Levine's murder, a slaying occurred on the UC Berkeley campus, which was also rumored to be the work of the Death Angels. The Death Angels were a genocidal black Muslim faction consisting of 4 black men: Manuel Moore, Larry Green, Jesse Lee Cooks, and J.C.X. Simon. According to records, the group committed at least 15 murders, while some sources suggest their involvement in as many as 270 deaths. However, it is worth noting that the Death Angels primarily used .32 caliber pistols for point-blank shootings, whereas the attacks on Perloff and Levine involved strangulation and stabbing, respectively. The unsolved nature of these cases continued to perplex investigators, leaving the campus community fearful and wondering if a serial killer was targeting young individuals in the area. On March 24, 1974, Janet Ann Taylor, the 21-year-old daughter of former Stanford athletic director Chuck Taylor, was tragically strangled while hitchhiking to her La Honda home after visiting a friend on the Stanford campus. Her lifeless body was discovered in a roadside ditch the following morning. Detectives investigating the case acknowledged the similarities between the murders of Taylor and Leslie Marie Perloff. Both Perloff and Taylor had been strangled, although Taylor's assailant used their hands instead of a scarf. There was no evidence of a sexual assault in either case. Notably, both victims were found barefoot and wearing raincoats, with their purses missing. The motives behind these murders remained elusive for investigators. The lack of money in Taylor's purse led to speculations of robbery, but the true motive remained uncertain. Sheriff's Inspector Rudy Simpson admitted, "We really don't know who we're looking for. It's a rough one." When examining the unsolved Stanford murders, there appeared to be no clear connection in terms of the method of killing. However, on the surface, all the crimes seemed senseless and devoid of a clear motive. In Arlis Perry's case, speculation arose due to her interactions with the Bismarck Process cult. Rumors suggested that someone from the cult, possibly a leader or ordered assassin, traveled to California because Arlis had attempted to convert their members to Christianity. In 2018, serial killer John Arthur Getrew was charged with Leslie Perloff's murder. Investigators linked DNA to Getrew found under Perloff's fingernails. He was also charged in the murder of Janet Taylor. Getrew was sentenced to life in prison in November of 2021. Previously, he had served 6 years in a German prison for the murder and rape of a 15-year-old girl. His father was stationed at a military base in Germany. Once there, Getrew lured the 15-year-old Margaret Williams to a field where he assaulted and murdered her. After serving 6 years in prison, Getrew returned to the United States and lived in the Bay Area near his parents. In 1975, a year after the murder of Janet Taylor, Getrew was charged with the rape of a female explorer scout while he was the troop leader. The charge was pled down to a misdemeanor statutory rape. Getrew was charged with a 6-month sentence in county jail, a $200 fine, and 2 years of probation. But instead, he ultimately received 5 months of a suspended sentence and served the remaining 30 days in jail on weekends. During the time he committed the murders of Janet Taylor and Leslie Perloff, Getrew lived near the Stanford campus and worked as a cardiology technician at Stanford Hospital.
We know he committed one murder. We believe that he committed this murder. We believe that there are others that may be similar. So, in my mind, I think he may very well be a serial killer, but we still have a lot of investigation to do.
I mean, I'm in shock. Sarah Nelson lived across the street from Getru for decades when he lived in Newark. She said her family entrusted him with their house keys when they went on vacations and never would suspect him of anything like this.
I just can't believe it. His wife was so nice and everything, and his children, and, you know, growing up and everything. He was probably here for, I don't know, 20 odd years or so.
Leslie lost her life. She did not live like he did. So we're committed to making the arrest, no matter how long it takes, to make sure that the family knows that this person is charged with murder, no matter how long ago it's been.
An intriguing aspect of Arlis's murder is the positioning of her body. Her pants were moved but placed on top of her body, with her legs up and spread apart, while her arms were arranged in a crucifix position. The altar candle was forcefully inserted into her vagina. Viewed from above, her body appeared to be positioned in the Masonic symbol of Freemasonry. This raised the possibility that her murder was perpetrated by someone associated with the Freemason cult or by someone trying to create the appearance of Freemason involvement. Additionally, it seemed likely that Arlis may have been acquainted with her killer. Her meetings with the sandy-haired man at work or in church could have been prearranged encounters. The prevailing speculation suggested that Arlis Perry was meeting someone, possibly the enigmatic sandy-haired man. The identity of this individual and how they came to know each other remained a mystery. What was intriguing is that the police overlooked the potential cult connection and the distorted religious undertones surrounding the murder. The extent of Arlis's evangelical endeavors and her interactions with the process cult in Bismarck raised important questions. However, the police remained disinterested in pursuing that line of inquiry. In Bismarck, rumors circulated about a satanic cult allegedly involving prominent individuals who engaged in gruesome rituals at Pioneer Park and the caves behind University of Mary. A witness recalled seeing individuals arriving in town dressed as priests, but with red collars and upside-down cross necklaces instead of the traditional white collars. John Martinson, a former psychology professor, acknowledged the existence of peculiar religious stories during the time, but believes that Arlis was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Following the release of Mari Terry's book, The Ultimate Evil, students in Bismarck began searching for signs of satanic activity around the University of Mary. However, no evidence was found, and the caves behind the university were eventually filled in. Nevertheless, Terry remained steadfast in his belief that David Berkowitz, the son of Sam Killer, possessed knowledge that the police neglected to investigate. Berkowitz himself alluded to connections with the University of Mary, mentioning cult activities there nearly 8 years before Terry's book was published. Terry further confirmed the occurrence of rituals at the university during the 1970s. Detective Ken Kahn, who interviewed Berkowitz at the Attica State Prison, found the notorious killer to be evasive and uncooperative regarding specific details. This led Kahn to believe that Berkowitz may have been toying with the crime writer and had no knowledge of Perry's or any other murders at Stanford. But Martinson and Terry firmly maintained that Berkowitz possessed vital information, citing his documented presence near the nearby Minot Air Force Base before committing his own murders. When shown photographs of individuals believed to be involved in Perry's murder, Berkowitz identified one of the men as someone he had encountered during his satanic cult meetings in Minot. According to journalist Mari Terry, Perry was targeted by a Bismarck satanic cult for murder. She had gone to Mandan, North Dakota to try and convert satanic worshippers to Christianity and was marked for death for that reason. According to Terry, the cult was in North Dakota and operated between the years of 1972 to 1976. Terry wrote, quote, "The cult's existence in a wooded area behind Mary College has been confirmed by at least 10 people, including police officers, area residents, nuns who taught at Mary College, and other Bismarck citizens who were involved in the Christian activities." Importantly, the latter sources belong to the same religious organizations as Arlis did, Young Life and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. A nun reportedly told Terry, quote, "My students knew all about it. They said the cult used to kill dogs in the back of here. We have a large cross here at the graveyard, and the devil worshippers used to creep up the hill to spit on our cross." The Reverend Don DeCook, who was the pastor of Arlis's church, admitted that the rumors about a satanic cult had persisted in the area for a long time. A lot of the cult activity had been rumored at the Minot Air Force Base. Serial killer David Berkowitz stated that he was at a cult meeting where an individual got up and told about killing Arlis. Berkowitz wrote, quote, "My happens to be the second most important point of the new Son of Sam investigation. Why did I write about Mrs. Perry? Simply because I had already known where she once lived, and I also knew that the murder was done by a cult. It was not a sex killing. How do I know? You figure it out." The pieces of the puzzle continued to elude the investigators, and the quest for the truth surrounding Arlis Perry's murder and potential cult involvement persisted. Despite the detectives' hopes of utilizing advanced DNA technology and handprint databases to generate leads, the identity of the individual who left behind the semen and bloody handprint remained a mystery for decades. Arlis Perry's parents tried to maintain contact with the Santa Clara Sheriff's Department for over 3 decades, seeking updates and pursuing justice for their daughter. The murder had taken a severe psychological toll on Arlis's father, Marvin. He died before he could find out the identity of Arlis's killer, which was his dying wish. And only 3 months after his death, there finally came a break in the case. Steve Crawford was a security guard who claimed to have found the body of Arlis inside the Stanford Memorial Church. Investigators found semen on a kneeling pillow near Perry's body. They also found a palm print on a candle. Neither the semen or the palm print had matched Crawford, although at the time, the security guard had refused to give DNA on his own. Detectives obtained his DNA from items he had thrown away. Crawford had been a person of interest since the beginning of the investigation, Santa Clara County Sheriff Lori Smith said. Our detectives continued to piece together additional information to this tragic puzzle, and we were able to recently link Crawford's DNA to the crime scene. On June 28, 2018, police and sheriff's deputies went to Crawford's apartment to serve a search warrant. Deputies spoke to Crawford through the closed front door. Crawford stalled their entry by stating that he had to get dressed. After several minutes, deputies believed that Crawford was stalling and unlocked the door with a key given to them from the landlord. Upon entry, they saw Crawford sitting on his bed with a gun. The deputies backed off, out of the way of the door, and then they heard a gunshot. Crawford had taken his life with 1 shot to the head. Upon entering his home, detectives found that Crawford had thought of suicide for some time. There was a suicide note, dated from 2016, that Crawford had written after he had been interviewed by a sheriff's detective. The note, according to Smith, was hastily written and did not make any mention of Perry's murder.
And so during the search of the apartment, there were a couple of items of interest, nothing really linking the homicide, but a couple of interesting items. One, there was a box in his closet with some important papers in it, and in it was a book called The Ultimate Evil, and it's a book about serial killers. And the second item, there was a suicide note. The suicide note appeared to be hastily written. It had the date 2016 on it. And we think that coincides probably with the time that Detective Sergeant Alanis interviewed him. And I don't think he'd been interviewed in quite some time prior to that. And we're still analyzing the note. It did not reference anything about the murder. And it was garbled, difficult to read. And again, we're doing some more forensic evidence on that. A couple of factors led to us actually going to the house. We went there to serve a search warrant with the intent to arrest him. We had enough evidence at that time, even independent of the search warrant, to make the arrest, and that was our intent. The investigation, when we first discovered the DNA, from when we sent some additional evidence items to an outside lab and found DNA on her items, his DNA on her items. And so after that, we had to do several things like re-interview people. But one of the things that was time-consuming was we recontacted everybody that had been in the church that night 43 years ago and took their DNA and their fingerprints. We wanted to make sure that we ruled them out. And so everything was a culmination of all of the investigation that they had done since the time that we discovered the DNA. I cannot speculate on why he committed suicide, but I think that he might have believed that his time was up. Currently, we're still processing the car. that was left at his apartment building. We have that, and we're processing that. You know, with a search warrant, you never know what you can find. We were hoping to find something that would link him directly to the crime. 43 years ago, sometimes that's not possible. But I'm not sure that we will find anything other than we could find written material. You know, you never know when you search, but our detectives are really familiar with the case, and in looking through the car, they'll know what could be of value.
Do you think that he might be connected to some other cases, and that's why you're going through this with a fine-tooth comb?
You know, we're going through it because we want to continue to follow up all leads. You never know with homicide suspects, especially some that are so random at this time. And during this time, there were a lot of serial killers in this area. Kemper in Santa Cruz, and it seemed to be a real difficult time in this area and surrounding areas for serial killers. So we'll look at that. We have a chart of when he was living in this area, the number of unsolved homicides versus when he was not living in the area. That was one that one of the media outlets gave to me a few minutes ago, but we're always looking at that. I know that there's a lot more work to do on this case, even though the suspect that I believe is the killer is dead.
Little is known of Crawford. He was a drum major in a Catholic high school, and at some point he was married. He served in the Air Force and worked for the Stanford Department of Public Safety in 1971 as a police officer and carried a gun. In 1972, the new police chief made the decision to reorganize the department, only allowing qualified officers to carry guns. Crawford was asked to reapply and did not make the cut as a police officer. He was given the option to become a security guard, which he took, but complained bitterly about it. He was arrested for stealing items from the Stanford campus, claiming that he wanted to get back at the university, both for treating him as a suspect and demoting him to a night watchman. In April of 1992, Crawford was arrested for stealing over 300 books from Stanford University. These items included leather-bound Latin books dating back from the 16th century. Inside his apartment, authorities had found a copy of the book The Ultimate Evil, which detailed the murder of Arlis Perry. Crawford was retired, living on Social Security in his San Jose apartment. Neighbors described him as normal, but that he kept to himself. "I've always believed that it was an inside job," reporter Scott Herhold said, "because it took a while for the insider to lay out the way she was done. This was someone who was not going to be interrupted, and he felt confident he was not going to be interrupted."
Our detectives are still at the scene searching the residence for additional evidence connecting Crawford to this murder and to any other unsolved murders. I cannot understate the efforts of our detectives. They've done an exceptional job. Many cold case homicide detectives have worked on this for years. We followed all the leads and unraveled the entanglement of the evidence associated with the murder of Arlis Perry. We truly have a talented group of detectives who provide exceptional services to the residents of Santa Clara County. This is a case that eludes us no longer. Lead detective Sergeant Richard Alanis kept this picture of Arlis Perry with him as a constant reminder that her life and this case had value. This case was really personal to me. She was murdered just soon after I started the sheriff's office, and it was high profile at the time. It's been frustrating throughout the years that we could never get enough evidence to charge the suspect. It's difficult for her family, it's difficult for the department, but we finally have closure on this case.
How were you able to get Crawford's DNA?
The detectives had continually gone through the evidence, submitted additional evidence for testing. There was no DNA at the time of the murder, of course, but then there have been enhancements in their capabilities, so we just continued to submit the evidence to the crime lab, and it came from, I think, an item of her clothing.
And can you explain what initially cleared him 44 years ago? Why
Nothing ever cleared him. There was just not enough evidence to charge him with the crime.
Did the contact with him ramp up recently, or was this steady over the last however long?
It's been on and off throughout the years. We generally would have had a need to talk with him. Ramped up recently, absolutely.
Is there any connection between the known connection between the suspect and Arlis?
No, none at all. You know that she was murdered in the church at Stanford, and he was a security guard. I don't think we have any evidence at this time that they knew each other at Stanford, but they were both associated with Stanford.
Nearly 50 years have elapsed since the tragic murder of Arlis Perry, yet her memory endures. Peggy Swanberg, a friend of Arlis, said, quote, "She was a good friend. I loved her a lot. She was serious and quiet, but she cared a lot about people, and what mattered to her most was her Lord and Bruce. I have watched her grow. I've seen how the Lord worked in her life, and I know she is with him."